When the judge's gavel echoed through the courtroom, I felt something inside me collapse. The papers I signed that morning marked the official end of my marriage, but in truth, the relationship had been dying for years. Still, when the finality arrived, it struck me harder than I expected. Divorce, I realized, wasn't just the loss of a partner, it was the loss of a life I thought I'd built forever. I walked out of the courthouse with nothing but a small box of documents. My savings were reduced after endless legal fees, my home was no longer mine, and even the friendships we once shared as a couple had quietly dissolved into silence. It was as though I had been erased from my own story. For weeks, I stayed inside my rented apartment, a shell of who I once was. The walls felt bare, the air heavy, and the silence unbearable. Every corner reminded me of what I had lost, my stability, my dreams, my family. Even my reflection in the mirror seemed like a stranger's face, someone older, more tired, more broken. But as the days passed, I realized that grief can only carry you for so long before life nudges you forward. It started with small steps, short walks in the morning, grocery trips without breaking down in the aisles, and finally, a slow return to the park near my building. That park became my safe place. The fresh air, the sound of children laughing in the distance, and the gentle sway of trees reminded me that the world still moved, even if my own had stopped. It was in that park that I noticed Daniel. Daniel was my neighbor's son. I remembered him faintly from years ago, a lanky teenager mowing the lawn with his headphones in, rarely making eye contact. But now he was different. In his mid-20s, Daniel had returned home after graduate school, taller, more assured, yet with a kindness in his expression that caught my attention. One morning, as I sat staring at the pond in the park, lost in thought, Daniel approached. He held 2 cups of coffee and extended one to me. "You look like you could use this," he said with an easy smile. I almost refused out of politeness, but the warmth in his voice disarmed me. "Thank you," I murmured, taking the cup. He sat beside me, not prying, not pushing. "Rough day?" he asked gently. "Rough year," I replied before I could stop myself. The honesty surprised me. I hadn't said much to anyone lately. Daniel didn't press. Instead, he nodded in quiet understanding. "Then you'll need the stronger roast," he said, motioning toward the cup. His attempt at humor made me laugh for the first time in weeks. That small exchange was the beginning of something I never could have predicted. In the days that followed, Daniel and I began crossing paths more often. Sometimes at the park, sometimes by the mailboxes, sometimes when his parents invited me over for dinner. He was thoughtful, intelligent, and deeply passionate about writing, his chosen career. Despite the years between us, conversation with him flowed effortlessly. He spoke of his dreams, his struggles, his travels, and he listened, truly listened, when I shared pieces of my story. One night, after his parents had gone to bed, Daniel and I lingered in their backyard beneath string lights. The crickets chirped softly around us. "You know," he said quietly, "when I was younger, I used to see you sitting on your porch. You always looked strong, like no matter what happened, you had everything under control." The word struck me unexpectedly. Strength was the last thing I felt. "Appearances are funny like that," I admitted. "You never really know what's going on beneath them." Daniel's eyes softened. "Maybe. But I think real strength is surviving, even when it doesn't feel like you are." That night, his words stayed with me. For the first time in a long while, I felt seen, not as someone broken, but as someone still standing. Over the following months, our bond grew. He brought me books he thought I'd enjoy. I shared with him stories of mistakes and lessons from my marriage. We laughed together, sometimes about silly things, sometimes about life's absurdities. There was an honesty to Daniel I hadn't known in years. One rainy afternoon, I heard a knock on my apartment door. Daniel stood there, soaked from the storm, holding a bag of groceries. "You mentioned you weren't eating well," he explained, sheepishly. "So, I thought I'd cook." I raised an eyebrow, amused. "You can cook?" "Not really," he admitted, "but I can read instructions. And I figured company is half the recipe." That evening, my tiny kitchen filled with laughter as we fumbled with vegetables, burned rice, and try to salvage a half-decent meal. It wasn't about the food. It was about the joy of not being alone, of sharing a moment that felt light in the midst of so much heaviness. But with joy came fear. As I found myself growing closer to him, questions began to haunt me. He was younger, with a whole future ahead, while I was someone piecing together the fragments of a shattered past. Was it fair to let him into my world? Could this be real, or was it just a temporary comfort? One evening, as we walked through the park, Daniel stopped suddenly. His voice was steady but serious. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course," I said. "Why do you always look at me like you're holding something back?" The question startled me. "What do you mean?" He exhaled slowly. "I know you've been through a lot, and I don't want to complicate your life. But I can't pretend I don't feel something when I'm with you. Do you feel it too?" My heart raced. For so long, I had defined myself by what I'd lost. But Daniel was offering me something different, not pity, not rescue, but connection. After a long pause, I whispered, "Yes, I feel it too." His smile in that moment wasn't wide or triumphant. It was gentle, like the confirmation of something he had known all along. From then on, our relationship deepened naturally. It wasn't about rushing or labeling what we were. It was about the quiet joy of companionship, the way he'd bring me coffee on difficult mornings, the way we'd spend hours discussing books, or the way he encouraged me to write again. He reminded me that life still had chapters waiting to be written. Yet, whispers began. Neighbors raised eyebrows. Some friends questioned me. They noticed the age difference, the unusual pairing. At first, their doubts gnawed at me, making me wonder if I was being foolish. But one evening, when I confessed my fears, Daniel simply said, "People will always talk. What matters is what we know to be true. And I know that being with you feels right." His certainty quieted the storm inside me. In the months that followed, I slowly rebuilt my life. I found joy in small routines again. I started writing short stories and even submitted some to local publications. Daniel chased his dream of publishing a book, and I was there to encourage him through every draft. Through it all, love didn't arrive with fireworks or dramatic gestures. It bloomed quietly, in laughter, in comfort, in the kind of presence that feels like home. Looking back now, I realize the divorce was not the end of my story. It was the turning point. Yes, I lost almost everything I thought mattered, but in that empty space, something new and far more meaningful had room to grow. Daniel taught me that healing is not about forgetting the past, but about opening yourself to the future. He showed me that it is never too late to begin again, never too late to love, never too late to believe in happiness.